Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to episode 183 of Weighing In with Mark Ostrander. I'm David Mirikitani. Mark, we usually set the agenda, what we're going to talk about, and there were weeks when we weren't on the air where there's just nothing to talk about, and it's crazy. I don't know how we're going to get to everything in 45 minutes today.
I know, with the conference tournament starting this weekend, some of the matches we saw last weekend, there's just a lot going on, and I'm excited for this part of the year to get going.
Yeah, most definitely. So we want to remind everybody our podcast is made possible by USA Wrestling, the national governing body for wrestling in the United States, and sponsored by Nike Wrestling. Shout out to Grant Turner. Go to athleteps.com for all of your Nike and USA Wrestling branded wrestling gear. So there's a bunch to get into. We're going to talk about some of the matches that were upsets and where it changed the rankings. We'll take a look at that. We're going to talk a little bit about the conference tournaments this weekend, the Mateo Pelicone entries, what happened at the Rockfin event the other night. But let's start with Penn State, Ohio State. That was a duel that you and I were both pretty excited about. You know, it turned out to be good. You and me made some picks, and we were going to talk about how right or wrong our picks were, but just due to time, we'll skip that. I think the biggest thing is Carter Sriracha, and then on Monday, Kirkfleet comes back and wrestles Maryland. Obviously, who he wrestled isn't relevant. The fact that he wrestled is super relevant. But let's talk about the Sriracha Romero match. You know, what were your thoughts there?
Sriracha, I mean, he's had a lot of great matches this year. He had one bad match. He's keeping matches really close, which is actually benefiting him in the long run because he's able to score in certain positions that toward the end of a match that I've been really impressed with. That match could have went either way, obviously. But
sure,
he did the same thing, 2 days before that when they wrestled Michigan. Or maybe it was last week they wrestled Michigan, but he did the same thing to Massa. So scored late in the match. That's how he won it, in overtime, in fact. So he's able to compete at the highest level toward the end of the matches. That is going to benefit Penn State tremendously when it comes national time and conference time.
I think he's the guy that we thought we were going to get when he went 18-0 and won the scuffle, right? What he's really done well is, and I think I'm saying the same thing, but a different way, that he really is composed, right? Like, it's you and I coach freshmen and sophomores, and sometimes it takes till their sophomore year to not panic in those tight matches, to not worry about going into overtime. He seems really calm. The other thing he can do really well for a freshman is ride for 30 seconds. So I think that's an important thing. We're certainly don't know where he stands with Kemmer or Labriola, but he's probably going to wrestle one of those guys not this weekend, but the following weekend. And we'll talk a lot more about the Big Tens because the conference tournaments are different this year. Normally, all the conference tournaments are on the first weekend of March, except historically like the Pac-12. This year, 5 of the 7 tournaments are this coming weekend, and the only ones that aren't are the Big Tens and the Big 12s. And I'm going to give myself a quick shout out. I get to do the Big 12s again next weekend on ESPN Plus. So, I better do a good job because there'll be more eyes and ears on us with only 2 conference tournaments going on instead of 7. So, but Sriracha really helps them. And we'll talk about Kirkfleet in a minute. So the other duel was Bedlam, and Oklahoma State wins again, but Justin Thomas majored Sheets, and Mantanona beat Plott. And Oklahoma State's definitely a team title contender, team medal, or a team trophy contender. But they got some problems, man. Cade Brock is hurt. Dusty Hone didn't even wrestle. They moved Jacason Burks up from 25 to 41. Sheets is definitely hurt. He can't be 100% if he's getting majored by Justin Thomas. I mean, this is the same guy that beat Caleb Young in Carver Hawkeye last year, which is, you're an Iowa guy. That's no small accomplishment. And in a duel where they got kind of pounded. So it wasn't like they were on the good momentum side of thing, and he stopped momentum. And then Plott's banged up. He lost to Montalvo and it beat him earlier. or not, he lost to Mantanona, because my note is, will they bring Montalvo in? You know what I mean? And those are guys that could score points for them at nationals. Cade Brock was a definite All-American contender. Wyatt Sheets was a definite All-American contender. And Platt was wrestling like one. So when you see Oklahoma State, I looked at them as a team that could have been the third best team if they wrestled a good tournament. But you pull out three guys that aren't 100% that could have medaled, it's going to be tough for them to get there.
And I agree. I think, we're still basically a month away from the national tournament. So, this weekend, you got next weekend, Big 10, Big 12, and then a week and a half later, the national tournament starts. So hopefully they get time to get those guys healthy. Cade hadn't wrestled for quite a while, so I didn't really consider him being a big part of the formula unless he came back late. But I think they're going to need Sheets, and I think they're going to need Plots. Without a doubt, those are guys that they're going to need if they want to get a trophy and bring it back to Stillwater this year.
And you're right that Cade didn't wrestle, but when we think of
he did it early in the year, and then he was out, and
right.
There was talk about he was hurt again. So, yeah.
But in the formula, like, to use your concept of it, and I agree with it, he was in the formula because he's on the rankings, and that's like, if you don't pull him out. And we'll talk about some rankings here stuff in a second. Here's some of the major upsets that happened, just in terms of where rankings changed. Patrick McKee beat DiAgostino 9-6, and we'll look at the rankings in a second and how that happened. Blockus, who's kind of had an up and down year, beat Yaya Thomas 3-2. Yaya wrestles that style. He's going to be in a lot of 3-2, 4-3, 5-4 matches. He lost the one takedown to none match. Taylor Venz put it on Bronigal 12-1. That's we saw Andy Hamilton put a tweet out a couple weeks ago where everybody besides Aaron Brooks in the Big Ten has beaten everybody and lost to everybody. So that'll be an interesting seeding meeting, because that feels like that's a matchup conference where maybe you can beat me, but there's two other guys you can't beat, and I can't beat you, but I can beat two other guys. And so it's all going to be on who gets on what side. And it's almost like 25 where you're like, you just don't want to be on the top. I mean, I'm not saying Brooks is as dominant as Spencer Lee, but it feels like it's similar there, right?
Yes.
Yep. And then Deacon hadn't wrestled all year and just came out of the chute and beat Brayton Lee 12-0. So you kind of go from, well, should he really be number one, to that's a guy that's scoring bonus points on a top 8 guy in the country.
Yep.
And
that, we both kind of talked about, we were wondering why he was sitting so long and hadn't wrestled. Was he hurt? Were there things going on? Was he having troubles getting his weight down? Obviously, the thoughts that I had going through my mind were absolutely wrong. This kid is ready to go. And right now, he looks better than anybody at that weight. And I know that's a, top 3 heavyweight with 3 guys that could win the title. But to me, right now, he looks better than he did last year. And he beat both those guys last year at the Vegas tournament. So,
yeah, and Heidley beat Carr last year, and Heidley's having a great season. Carr has jumped levels. His bonus level now is about 83%, which is, he was below 50% last year. It's hard to take that into account because he's probably not wrestling as good a competition this year because of COVID. But he's definitely scoring more points, so it's going to be fascinating to see how that goes. I mean, if they all go undefeated, Deacon's going to be the number 1 seed at nationals. I mean, he started as the number 1. He'll have gone through the Big Ten. The Big Ten's not as good at 57 as it is at some other weights, but it's still good. And there'll be no reason for him not to be 1. This is a crazy way to say it, but of all the guys, the person that has the best loss is Hayden Heidley when he lost to Nolf that year at nationals, and in that super controversial match. We could probably have a 45-minute discussion on rankings about how do you include margin of victory and good losses, because they're not supposed to show up, but they definitely influence you as a ranker if you've seen those matches. The other one Peyton Omania beat Kane and Storr, which was significant for a couple of reasons. Kane and Storr was like on that cusp of that 7 through 10 ranking nationally, and Omania had a losing record. Omania is a big-time Greco guy. He's made a couple age group world teams. But he's a California kid, and his coach was Mark Halverson, who passed away, young, passed away in his 50s. And they mentioned it on the during the broadcast, but Omani had hit 2 lefty headlocks, for 6 points each time. Certainly deserved to win the match, was super emotional. We don't root for or against guys, because if you root for one guy, you're rooting against another guy. It felt like a great tribute, though, to Mark Halverson, and he was impressive in that match. It'll be interesting to see if he can take some momentum from that into the Big Tens.
What I really was impressed with, David, is if you watch the match, he actually tried to bonus him toward the end of the match. And he wasn't projected to win this match, but he had the lead. He was right there. He went after that last takedown like it was nobody's business, and Storr was just trying to defend him and not give up a bonus, which is kind of odd when you're projected to win the match and all of a sudden you're on your heels and you're trying not to get bonus instead of trying to win the match. So that to me was an impressive performance by him. And it's going to be crazy at the Big Tens next weekend. And we'll talk a lot about that next week before it happens. But there were some good upsets last week for the guys that won, obviously, not for the guys that lost. They're probably not too happy about it, but they're going to get their shot in the conference tournaments this weekend and the following weekend.
Yeah, and you and I both coached a long time. If you're coaching at Michigan State, you've got to figure out how Peyton Omania can bottle up that energy and bottle up that mindset and use it for 2 more weekends. So,
yeah.
Last note I have here is Kirk Fleet's back for Penn State. I follow freestyle, I think, a little more closely than you do. I've been lucky enough to coach at some of these meets and seen him wrestle, but we both knew his top-end talent. Again, he beat up on 2 guys, so it's kind of hard to tell. You can find somebody to wrestle and look really good against, but you also might be that good. I think for Penn State, if he's as good as we think he is, he's a top 3 guy. Like it feels like, he jumps into that tier with Gable and Paris, and maybe it's like 1A, 1B, 1C. Maybe it's like that. Okay. But it certainly feels like he might be above the Cassiope tier, but it also feels like Cassiope's on his own tier. And we've talked about that, where he's beaten everybody below him, hasn't beaten the guys above him yet. I think at worst, Kirk Fleet's in the quarterfinals, and then you see what happens.
Well, we had talked about this earlier. I mean, where are they going to put him in the bracket? It's got 2 matches in. He wrestled 2 guys that haven't won a match yet this year. So he has no good wins. So they're going to have to go back on what he's done in the past. That was his first college duel. They're not supposed to look at freestyle. So I'm going to be kind of interested to see where they end up putting him. Hopefully he's not going to catch somebody like Gable or Paris, in the quarters. We don't know where they're going to end up putting him. But I do think he moved Penn State from being an All-American at heavyweight, because I think they were right on the fringe, round of 12 maybe, getting in there for maybe a medal, but it was going to be a lower tier medal more likely, to being in a conversation of being in the semis at the national tournament and guarantee a pretty high spot as an All-American, which is obviously going to really help Penn State.
Yeah. So we're doing a share screen now, obviously. And here are the composite rankings. And we want to thank Christian Thompson again. He puts these together for us every week, does a fantastic job. And we'll probably talk about what he does, but he runs a bunch of really cool fantasy contests over at fantasygrade.com. He's got a charity contest. He's got these salary cap contests, but he does these for us. I used to have to do these by hand, and it would take me hours. I would do them like once every 3 weeks to make sure I wasn't missing anything at track wrestling when you and I were doing the rankings. And this guy just kicks them over to us, and it's amazing. But And I was listening to the guys at Flow, and they were talking about where they're going to seed him. And it's almost, I think, like they were trying to say, well, if we could get him seated like 11, where then he would wrestle the 6, the 3, and the 2, or 10, where he would wrestle the 7, the 3, and the 2, that would be fair. I think wherever they seed him in the Big Ten, it's going to be hard. But the good news is if he wrestles like we think he will, he'll take, he'll play second, third, fourth, first at the Big Tens, and then he'll be seated correctly at nationals, which is kind of what really matters. So what I did here was highlight some things for people to keep an eye out for this weekend. We've tried to stay away from the Big Ten and Big 12 guys because they're not going to wrestle. I highlighted a couple of those for people just to watch out for, but at 25, Latona Camacho is a huge match for seeding at nationals because right now, Lee's undefeated, Hildebrandt, Courtney, and Latona are all undefeated. If Latona wins, he could get on that 2-3 line, which would obviously mean Hildebrandt or Courtney would bump down to the 4 line. If you're Hildebrandt or Courtney, you're rooting for Jacob Camacho because if Camacho wins and they both have a loss, and then you can do work at your conference tournament, which Hildebrandt's wrestling this. They're actually both wrestling this weekend as well.
Yes.
They're going to be 2 and 3. And we've talked about how important the bottom side of the bracket is. So the other thing I highlighted here was Lamont Teskey, but we can talk about that next week. That's a potential Big 12 final. 33, huge news. Stevan Misic, which we talked about, is definitely not wrestling this year. And when we go to the team rankings, which you put together, that's going to have a huge impact on things because he was a guy that across the board was ranked second, third. That he was getting ballpark on average about 15 points in the team rankings. So you take 15 points out, and we'll go over to the team rankings for Michigan. I think Penn State goes above Michigan just in my mind when I'm sort of doing how do I think it's going to end up? But when you pull him out, and you have to wonder if Misic is going to wrestle in college anymore. He's one of those 2 guys that's already in the Olympics who lives in our country along with Amin. He got an extra year when he transferred. I don't know that he wants to keep going to college anymore. So, he might be done with college wrestling. The other thing here I highlighted is the ACC, which is just an absolute monster bracket. Philip P. Myers, Hernandez, Hayes, and Trombley. Hayes and Trombley are the prelim. They're the pigtail match to get into the semis. So the ACC is not deep in quantity because it's only a 6 or 7 team conference, but it's super deep in quality in some of these ways.
Yes.
41, I highlighted Alan Hart because I really believe that if he wins this conference tournament, he has a chance to be the 3 or 2 seed because everybody else in the top 5 is in the Big Ten. So 3 of those guys have to lose at their conference tournament. Only one of them can win it. He'll be undefeated. He's got to win over, I think it's Ian Parker, if I remember correctly. And so that handcuffs him to Parker in a good way, that he's always going to be one above him at the worst. And then the other thing I highlighted was Tariq Wilson, Zack Sherman for probably the 14th time. But that, again, is a huge match in the ACC. And because that conference is so small, those matches have a huge impact on the team race. We saw Virginia Tech and North Carolina State go down to actual match points on what decided the duel. You have to imagine that it's going to be super close in the team race there as well. 49, Austin O'Connor. He's got a chance to be the number 1 seed at nationals. It'll be really interesting to see him and Sasso. I highlighted Brock Muller here because he'll be undefeated if he can win the MAC. I think those are your 3 guys you're looking at, assuming they can handle business because Muller beat Boo. And then if Sasso won the Big Tens, that takes out Muir and Ikar. And if Boo won the Big 12, that takes out Alirez and Deegan. Kazan Clark, I highlighted just because he's in there, but a bunch of people don't have him ranked. But if he is wrestling and he goes undefeated, he's probably going to get a higher seed than 9th at nationals.
Correct.
And I highlighted Stewart Almania, but we already touched on them. 57, Hayden Hidley wrestles this weekend. Jesse Delvecchia. He's sort of the guy we don't talk about. And I think it's just because, honestly, he's kind of at a mid-major. We don't see Ryder a lot. He'll be in the same conference as JQ, so that'll be an interesting match. Josh Humphrey is ranked by one source, so I don't know how likely it is he's even wrestling. But if he isn't, then that bumps up like JQ to that 8 line, which would help Mizzou tremendously. And then Berge, Luan, Franek, and now Justin Thomas are all one match away. They're in that blood round. Obviously, this is composite and they're just rankings, but if you look at that so people can get an idea. And then 14, 15, 16 are all going to wrestle each other this weekend. And when we get to the allocations, that's going to be interesting. They're all in the Pac-12 together.
Yep.
65. So very interesting weight. Shane Griffith will be wrestling in the Pac-12. Mekhi Lewis. Some people used that injury default loss to drop him. Track dropped him the most to 5th. I don't know if I could have dropped him to 5th. I don't know what we would have done. That would have been probably one you and me argued about. Like, do we count it at all? Do we kind of count it? Is it like a half loss because it was a default? Yeah, yes, he was losing, but he's Mekhi Lewis. We watched him run through nationals. But anyway, Marinelli and Griffith and Whitlake and Valencia all have a chance to go undefeated. Alex Marinelli has not had good luck in the national tournament. You could somehow see Mekhi Lewis ending up on the 4-5 line or something like that. And hey, congratulations. That's your reward for being the number 1 seed. You get, the guy has a chance to be a 5-time national champion on your side of the bracket.
Yes.
Mekhi, Wenzel, and Keating are all in the ACC. I highlighted Valencia because he's kind of been in his brother's shadow, has been around a 12 guy that has a hard time getting over the hump. But he's an older guy. He's wrestled in a ton of these big matches. Arizona State is sneaky good this year. And they need him to finish like in this 5th, 6th kind of slot for them to get the points they need. And then I highlighted O'Toole because he's just a guy we're high on. And he has a chance to win that conference. And if he does, he's probably going to get a better seed at nationals than 14.
Yeah, I think when we get to the allocations, David, I think they only get 2 at that weight at 65. So
we'll talk about it.
It's important for Keegan to win it. Yeah.
Yep. So 74, not a lot here going on. I mean, everything's pretty straightforward. McNally wrestles this weekend, so just wanted to point that out. 84. Okay, so Bolin Hidley. Now, Bolin's beaten Hidley, I think, every time, but it's always been close. Okay. But if Hidley wins, Aaron Brooks is the number 1 seed at nationals, assuming he can get through the Big Tens. And Louis Dupre very likely would go to 2. At least, I shouldn't say likely, probably maybe, but 2, 3. And so that would put the loser of the Bolin Hidley match on the same side as Brooks. So we're right now, that isn't, I guess right now it's still the case, but they'd be on the top half of the bracket instead of the bottom half of the bracket. So something to keep an eye out for there. That match will probably have huge implications in the team race on the ACC as well. 97, North Leach wrestling this weekend. I cannot wait to talk about the Big 12s at 197 next weekend, but I'll hold off. But that's going to be great. Bullsack, very quietly, having a really good season. Again, kind of that mid-major stuff where he doesn't get a lot of the pub that some of the big schools do. And then Bonacorsi and Aiello, who have been ranked as high as 2, 3, 4, 5, each of them. Everybody's kind of beating each other up out there, and they've been inconsistent, but they're 10 and 11. So that's a big match. Heavyweight, Stencil wrestles this weekend. Stencil wrestles Elam in all likelihood. Okay, Elam is the only guy from Missouri seeded 3rd in the MAC. Everyone else is a 1 or a 2 seed. So he's going to have to beat somebody in the semis. But, Ethan Laird, Ethan Laird from Ryder, who actually beat him at the Omaha tournament at the U23s. And he's low-key good. People have been sleeping on that kid a little bit. He's a very athletic kid, kind of a really big 197-pounder, not a fat guy at all. He can really wrestle. Jordan Woods back. And Colton Schultz, who we saw really do well in Iowa, beat Isley and beat Gremmel. Really wrestled a smart match against Gremmel. Like, didn't even try to ride him in the regulation and waited to do what he knew how to do in the overtime, and won it on the rideouts. So those are kind of some things for people to keep an eye out on. Let's talk about the team composite rankings, and then we'll go to the allocation. So you put these together for us. I put in the color coordination because I'm old and my eyes are going bad. But what you did was take all the team scores from these 6 sources, and then we, compiled them and sorted them from big to little, obviously. And I just put these in tiers. I mean, Iowa clearly on a tier of its own, when you're almost doubled up. And then Penn State's got a pretty comfortable tier where like one guy could completely not wrestle well, like a guy that's ranked 4th, not wrestle, and they'd still be, a little bit of breathing room.
Yep.
And then you got this tier of Nebraska, VTech, NC State, Okie State, Michigan, and Arizona State. I've been talking for a lot, so I'll shut up here, but I just want to point out Okie State and Michigan are at 6 and 7 right now, which is pretty significant.
Yeah, and 2 weeks ago, Michigan was basically where Penn State was. They were kind of in a tier by themselves, but that's before, Penn State went in there and they lost a couple matches. They've lost, Stefan's not going to wrestle. A lot of team points. What are they going to do at 25? What are they going to do at 33 now? So it makes a big difference, because when you got a guy at 25 that was having a really good year, I understand he's struggling making weight. So maybe they think him at 33 has got a shot at placing. It's a little bit different at 33. He's not going to be able to get in some of those positions just because of the strength. So
we're talking about Ragus. We were talking about Ragusin, and we don't know if he's struggling. They moved him up for a couple matches, but we both were really intent when we saw him wrestle Penn State, and he actually acquitted himself very well against RBY and weighed in at 129. I don't think they were doing that unless they were planning on pulling him down to 25. And I think they just gave him a couple weeks off from having to make it.
Yeah. So, I think that's a big key, because I think he is possibly a top 4 guy at 25. I think at 33, to crack the top 8 is going to be a lot harder. So, that's something Michigan's going to have to figure out, depending on where they want to go with team trophies. But Virginia Tech has had a great year. I anticipate that they'll do really well at the national tournament. I think they'll do fine at their conference tournament. Obviously, North Carolina State's there. North Carolina's there. So, Oklahoma State's kind of going in the wrong direction, but that's more because of injuries, not because of talent. And then Arizona State, like you said, they're sneaky good. And you're forgetting, I think Missouri's going to have 10 guys at the national championship.
Yeah.
They've got them at 46 points. They're going to score more than 46 points at the national tournament, without a doubt. So how high can they go? Maybe top 4.
Well, what's interesting about Missouri, sorry to interrupt you, but JQ is not in the top 8 right now, and he would be if Josh Humphrey didn't wrestle. Keegan O'Toole's not in the top 8, but I certainly think he's a guy we think can finish in the top 8. Zach Elam's not in the top 8. He's another guy that we think could finish in the top 8. And I actually got to coach Jeremiah Ken a couple years ago at the Southern Scuffle. His upside's pretty high as well. And Rocky Elam's not in the top 8. So, I mean, if you told me those guys placed, I wouldn't be shocked. Now, we've coached a long time. It usually doesn't all go your way, where all those guys wrestle, to their potential. But for sure, if you said 46 points plus some bonus, do you take the over-under? I think you and I would both take the over on Missouri.
Yeah.
So,
and then another thing, Ohio State's at 39.8 on average. If you'd have told me at the beginning of the year, or basically any year in the last 6 years, that they would be projected 12th with 39 points, I would have laughed at you, because they have a lot of talent on that team. So it's one of those years that there's so much, everybody's so close to each other.
A lot of parity. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I'm really looking forward to this weekend and next weekend. Things are going to work themselves out the way, they're going to be seated at the national tournament. Obviously, it's all going to work itself out, and
Yep, I agree.
see what happens.
So I'm going to get through a couple of things so we can run all the way up to the buzzer on allocation. So conference tournaments this weekend. The EIWA is at Pennsylvania. The Mid-Americans at Rider. The ACC's at NC State. The Pac-12's at Oregon State. The SoCon is at Appalachian State. Next weekend, Big Ten's at Penn State. Big 12's at Tulsa. I don't know if we'll get to this, but people should check out the Mateo Pellicone entries, the United States, who we are entering there, and the tournament's going to be fantastic. If you love international wrestling, it's going to be a great thing to watch. Rockfin held their event on Monday night. Probably the biggest upset was Zach Sanders won by fall over Gilman. Gilman was actually winning and got stepped over on a gut wrench, but a win is a win. I don't know what weight they made, and I don't know how that'll impact the seeding at the Olympic trials, but if it does, 57 is going to be chaos at seeding there. So, and then the other thing was I had Kevin Jackson and Jaden Cox on this week. I loved that podcast. Those guys are awesome. Talk about championship mindset. Those guys got enough gold medals to start a jewelry shop. And they have a very cool relationship with each other. One of my favorite things to do is to get two people on together and watch them talk about each other and watch the other one react like you and a Tony Davis, something like that. So it's, very cool to see that. If people haven't seen it, I hope they take a watch or a listen, because it's really good. And how I asked Kevin Jackson a question about his mindset on becoming a world and Olympic champion, and his answer was fascinating to me. So let's jump to allocations. So this came out, and I went and dorked out and added a line. We got this. I copied and pasted it over straight off the website. And then I added the coaches ranking. So we're going to do a quick explanation of this. The ACC allocations, which is line 2 on here, by weight class, 2, 3, 2, 2, 3, 2, 2, 2, 2, 3. 23 guys plus 10 for the automatic qualifiers of 33. So what that means is the top 3 guys from the ACC will go. Okay. So if the seeds hold, Latona, Camacho, and whoever else, that third guy's in, because you get 2 plus the champion. Yep. We should explain, the NCAA decided to do a 5-year average to determine these numbers, and they missed some things. They didn't count schools that were no longer wrestling, like in the EIWA. They gave them credit for all the qualifiers that Cornell and Princeton have had. Like UNI got credit for one conference when they've switched conferences. Schools that no longer have wrestling earned allocation for conferences that they were in that they can't help. I think they just kind of picked a method that they can go, well, it's equally unfair for everybody, and sorry, you just got to wrestle. The one thing they did do well is they left 7 wild cards at every weight, so ideally you'll get people in. But let's explain how this works. So at 125, there's actually a surplus. So there'll be one guy that was not in the latest coaches poll. And we're recording this, by the way, at 9 a.m. on Thursday. By the time the podcast comes out, the new coaches ranking should be out. So these numbers might be different, but they're right as of the time we're talking about this. But if you go through the ACC, they have deficits at 1, 2, 3, 6 weights. And they have pretty significant deficits. So I'm doing the Big 12s next weekend, and they're getting crushed. There's 26 allocations short. And so if I put over here on column P that the Big 10 has the worst deficit. They're minus 26. The IWA is plus 10. I mean, it's fairly significant here. The deficit overall, everybody has a deficit except for the EIWA. And you go, well, how can, it should end up being net zero. It isn't, because that's where the wild cards are going to come in.
Yes. And normally they only have 3 or 4 wild cards per weight. Let's make sure they understand that.
Yeah, it's usually like 5, usually 4 to 6. Because
I've never seen 7. I've never seen
no.
It since
Yeah,
they
usually
started
there's
doing this.
26 or 27 guys have gone through that gold silver qualification.
And in the past, they always did it by the rankings, who you beat, the quality of your wins, and that's how they decided the allocations for each conference. And
Yeah.
so I understand that they couldn't do that this year. They had to go to some type of formula. To be honest with you, David, this one didn't work for me. EIWA, and I just take a weight, 184. They get 6 qualifiers. They have one guy ranked in the top 25, one out of that weight class, yet they get to take 6 kids to the national tournament. That's a problem. It's a problem to all the other conferences that have guys that are ranked high, 174. They have one guy ranked. Now they only get to take 6 at that weight, but they only have one ranked in the top 25.
Yeah.
There you go. So, I mean, it's a problem, but it's better than not having a national tournament at all. That's all I can say. Without a doubt.
There. So. But here's what we're kind of summarizing. There are going to be some guys that deserve to go that aren't going to go. Okay. There are going to be some guys. And in a year like this, first of all, if you have an elitist sort of perspective, you're like, yeah, those guys weren't going to place anyway. Well, I can tell you this. Most of us that love wrestling would love to just say we were an NCAA qualifier. Okay. And you work your fanny off and you blood, sweat, tears, weight cutting, all that stuff, injuries, to just even be able to say, I was in the opening march, right? So that's a big deal. The other thing is it could affect the team race, especially if like in Oklahoma State gets dinged in those allocations. They're in the conference that's got sort of the worst problem. If you go down here, the other, like I looked at the Pac-12 and they got dinged at a bunch of weights too. So I'm just going to make sure people understand this. Like at 133, and I'll highlight this so people can see what we're looking at here. At 133 in the Big 12, they got 4 allocations, plus they get a champion. So that's 5. They got 11 dudes ranked. Okay. So Think about this. Let's just say everybody wrestles according to their ranking. And so they place accordingly. Like they're going to have to, first of all, they're going to have to wrestle to 11th place. I guess they don't have to, and they might be better off not doing that. Like they just wrestled to 8th, and then all those other guys that didn't, you get to pick between 9, 10, and 11. Like you and me would have been in the round of, that round of 12. I'm like, yeah, but Mark's got a way better record than David. So now we could, he'll be better chance of getting a wild card. But if all those guys go, then that's 6 of the 7 wild cards. And it's going to be hard. People are going to go, how are you going to give the guy that took 11th in the Big 12 a wild card over the guy that just missed by 1 spot, in like the 4th in the ACC, or the Pac-12 runner up, because they got nobody there. Like Michael McGee wins that weight, on paper. Now what happens? So it's going to be hairy, man.
Yep.
And, I mean, you've probably said it better than me because I'm so sick of COVID, but you've said it better than me. Like, hey, something is better than nothing. And I think I need to look at it more that way. But I'm the guy that changed the formula for the qualifiers at the NJCAA and how those were allocated and drew the brackets up and put the formulas together and the random number generators and all that stuff. So I'm a dork. I like figuring this stuff out. And if somebody said to me, give me a week, I could have figured out a more fair way to do this than this. I can tell you that. And
I think the coaches are thinking the same thing. I was hoping that the NCAA would change this when it came out because they had a lot of people complaining about it. They had to have understood what they did wrong with the allocations with certain schools. And I hate picking on the EIWA because it's a great conference, David. It really is. But they have 7 of the teams that normally wrestle in it are not wrestling right now. So you can't just give them all those extra guys when 7 of the teams aren't even competing. So
yeah, I don't want to short, the other 5 teams. But if you just take Cornell and Princeton and say, on average, those 2 teams qualify 10 guys a year, which I think is probably pretty safe.
It's low. It's low.
But so right, but safe, right?
Sure, safe.
That's
real safe.
That's their 10. That's the problem. Like if you pull those out and go, common sense says, okay, that those guys can't count this year, right? So let's just say they across the board took 1 off of each of the weights, okay, from the IWA. Now you don't really have a problem. Well, first of all, they got a surplus at 6 weights, but more importantly, those 10 allocations could get spread out somewhere else.
Correct.
And if you had done this math, what you probably do is assign them to the biggest negative numbers. I mean, it really wouldn't be that complicated. You go, the coaches know this better than anybody. So like 133 in the Big 12s would get 1, 174 would get 1. The Big 10 at 149 would get 1. The MAC at 285 would get 1. Just the biggest negative numbers. And honestly, I think people would have a lot less complaints about that. Plus, and I think it was Andrew Spey at Flow kind of talked about how he would have done it and how the allocations would have worked. And it looked really good. But I mean, even just simplifying it this way, and then he would have adjusted it as well with, hey, you got to count UNI's qualifiers in this conference for this year and this conference for this year. And, you know, you got to take Boise State's qualifiers out and you got to, you know, do these things. And I think you would have gotten a lot closer to where we wouldn't have had as many of these gigantic negative numbers. Negative numbers of like -2 or 3 are okay. That's literally what the wild cards are for. I mean, that's fine. It's actually okay.
-6 is not okay.
Yes.
-4 is not okay.
And what people should understand is that if you add the difference numbers up, they'll always add up to -7. So for example, 125, 1 plus -1 is 0, -4 is -4, -1 is -5, plus 0 is -5, and 2 more -1s make -7. Those are literally your wild cards. So the problem is it's net 7, but the 7th guy is not going to get a wild card because it went to the extra guy in the ACC in this case.
Yes.
Okay, so that's how people need to understand it. So, I mean, and you should probably expect the guys to get shorted in the conferences with the biggest negative number, the bottom guys there. Now, something crazy could happen, like Dayton Fix could, you know, I don't even want to put it out there, but somehow something happened and he gets injured and he just defaults out. He's going to get a wild card. I mean, there's no way he's not going to get the first wild card, and good luck seeding that guy at nationals, but that's how it's going to go.
And it's happened in the past. You know, we've had guys that were, you know, top 3 or 4 in the country. They get hurt and they decide to default out of the conference tournament to try to stay healthy enough to actually have a chance to compete at the national tournament. So it's going to happen. You're going to have upsets. You're going to have people get hurt. It's going to be a mess. In 2 weeks, it's going to be a mess trying to figure out who actually gets to go with the allocations the way they are right now. But again, I like to say it's better than nothing. So let's just work with what we got, and hopefully the kids understand that are wrestling this year, and they're going to have to go out and wrestle up to their seeds and try to steal a spot from somebody.
I don't even think the kids look at this stuff for the most part. So that's my buzzer. I think we're about out of time. We're brought to you by USA Wrestling, the national governing body for wrestling in the United States, sponsored by Nike Wrestling. Go to athleteps.com for all your Nike and USA Wrestling branded wrestling gear. Thank you guys so much for watching and listening, and we will speak to you all next week.